challenging norms in higher education, particularly regarding our campus designs. The paper that I've started here is the framing of a much larger project, or set of projects, hopefully, which will have some grand ambitions, which you'll find out about what they are today, what it might achieve, and sets the precedent for a project that I'm calling Campus 2.0. How modernized physical and digital environments can foster a much more innovative and evolving student experience. So this is 1918, when Dewey said, if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. I still think that is very pertinent. On that note, John Dewey famously said that, but that progressive insight remains highly relevant as universities confront rapid changes in student needs, industry demands, and technological possibilities. The concept of this project, Campus 2.0, has emerged in response, envisaging the university not as a static assembly of lecture halls, but as a dynamic hybrid ecosystem for learning. In essence, Campus 2.0 redefines learning spaces to be more flexible, collaborative, and integrated with real-world practice. It draws on Dewey's view of education and experiential and life-oriented experience, embracing Kolb's experiential learning cycle, and fosters the kind of communities of practice described by Wenger. According to Kolb's theory, meaningful learning arises through an active cycle of concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation, all influenced by the learner's environment. Equally, Wenger's social learning theory suggests that knowledge is created through participation in communities of practice, something that we do here at ACM, where groups share a concern or a passion for something that they do and learn, and how to do it better as they interact regularly. These frameworks suggest that how we design and use campus spaces, physical or virtual, profoundly shapes learning. In the aftermath of COVID, universities have a unique opportunity to build back better by rethinking the environments and pedagogies they have. Students have returned to campus, but both learners and staff have new expectations for flexibility and engagement. Universities UK notes that the pandemic accelerated digital innovation, and that simply reverting to a pre-pandemic world without any reflection or change isn't realistic or desirable. Indeed, many institutions are now striving to blend the best of online and in-person education. Campus 2.0 encapsulates this shift. It is as much about upgrading mindsets and workflows as it is about upgrading buildings. In the sections that follow, I'll examine why traditional higher education spaces often fall short, how UK student demographics and industry expectations are changing, and how new approaches, from hybrid learning to interdisciplinary project work, are driving the design of the next generation of learning environments. So, what is a learning space? The concept of a learning space extends beyond physical classrooms. Paul Temple argues that the design and utilization of space in higher education significantly impacts teaching and learning outcomes. Similarly, Savin Baden et al. Highlight the importance of considering learning spaces as dynamic environments that influence agency and pedagogical practices. In the context of hybrid learning, virtual spaces have become integral. The integration of digital tools and platforms have transformed traditional pedagogies, necessitating adaptable and flexible learning environments. Innovative learning spaces that foster creativity and transdisciplinary collaboration are gaining prominence. Orlova discusses the potential of creative spaces in educational environments, emphasizing their role in enhancing student engagement and fostering innovation. Furthermore, projects like the one detailed by Riekman illustrate how transdisciplinary teaching spaces can facilitate sustainable transitions in higher education. Higher education faces a challenge, of course, in that we recruit students who are still primarily taught in traditional environments with fixed curricula through their formative education. Blended, experiential, modular, displaced, clustered, and project-driven learning need to be incorporated at an earlier age, along with a commitment to digital skills, literacy, beyond that of rote learning design, if HE's new model is to be met with engagement. UK university students have become increasingly diverse. UK university students have become increasingly diverse, with notable changes such as the rise of commuter students. This trend, driven by the cost of living crisis and high accommodation costs, means many students no longer experience campus as a full-time residential community. Many also balance part-time work, as we know. HEPI reports that as much as half of the full-time student population work part-time on an average for 14.5 hours a week, requiring flexible schedules and facilities such as evening access or studios or remote participation options. Universities have responded with measures like block scheduling, which condenses in-person classes into fewer days per week, and enhanced digital resources to meet commuters' need, asynchronous delivery, for example. However, these adaptations come with challenges. Reduced physical presence on campus can weaken in-person interactions, diminish the sense of community, and exacerbate feelings of isolation, something that is also prevalent in higher education. As students increasingly become day visitors to campus, the institutions must create inclusive environments and informal social spaces that draw them in and foster a sense of belonging. Engagement metrics present challenges also. The OFS highlight a decline in continuation rates, dropping from 91.1% to 89.5% in 2024 for full-time degree students. This has to be factored in. Despite these challenges, most students continue to value the physical campus experience. Surveys reveal that the majority of students favour a blended approach to education, combining in-person and online elements. For instance, students may prefer to attend studio classes or group discussions in person while accessing lectures or tutorials online for convenience. This demand for flexibility underscores the need for Campus 2.0 designs that balance these preferences. That being said, this change must be met with an equally refined approach to delivery. If you want students to turn up to an online lecture at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, the experience has to be worth it. Universities must provide spaces that cater to diverse needs, such as collaborative hubs for group work, quiet zones for study, and technology-enhanced classrooms capable of supporting both physical and virtual participation. By prioritising adaptability and inclusivity, universities can ensure that their learning environments remain relevant and supportive for the modern student body. The purpose of higher education in the creative fields is not only to impart knowledge, but also to prepare graduates for the rapidly evolving creative industries. Traditional academic settings often fail to reflect real-world creative workflows, prompting universities to redesign curricula and spaces that simulate industry practices. Employers emphasize the need for graduates who are collaborative, technologically adept, and adaptable, skills that flourish in practice-oriented environments. FutureWorks, a UK institution specialising in creative education, has embraced this challenge by establishing an industry advisory panel to ensure its courses stay updated with the latest technologies, such as virtual production and artificial intelligence, something that, again, we have started to adopt here at ACM over the past 10 years. By integrating industry-recognised workflows into teaching, students gain hands-on experience with cutting-edge software, hardware, and production techniques. Assignments are often co-developed with employers or based on real-world scenarios, and students engage in peer and industry feedback cycles, effectively turning the learning environment into a simulation of professional working studios. Upgraded campus facilities play a critical role in aligning education with industry standards here. Similarly, many universities host on-campus startup incubators and makerspaces, which allow students to develop entrepreneurial projects under the mentorship of industry partners. These spaces blur the boundary between academia and the workplace. Students can pitch business ideas to investors, curate public exhibitions, develop indie games, all within the campus environment. By embedding professional practices into education, Campus 2.0 model suggests and ensures graduates are well prepared for their future careers. Crucially, though, industry should be invited to collaborate with institutions, as they already do, but on a much larger scale. Modules, spaces, assessments, portfolios, networks with industry sponsorship present an authenticity that students can relate to. With the HE sector and financial worries at the minute, it also offers a unique opportunity to build in commerciality, visibility, recruitment benefits, and stronger ROIs for all of the courses that we offer. COVID-19 pandemic mainstreamed hybrid and remote learning for all of us, challenging educators to balance flexibility with maintaining campus community while students value online learning convenience. Surveys show that they prefer a blended model combining in-person and online sessions. So why then do we worry when classrooms are empty? This question reflects the shift in assumptions about learning spaces, much like how remote work has normalized less populated offices. Campus 2.0 views empty seats as an opportunity to extend education beyond physical boundaries. To address challenges like reduced social interaction and disengagement, universities are retrofitting classrooms and video conference systems, adopting flipped classroom techniques, and creating engaging campus spaces such as maker labs and media lounges. Hybrid engagement strategies, including virtual common rooms and periodic in-person meetups, ensure connection and inclusivity. The future of education is likely more blended, as we know, utilising both virtual and in-person experiences to enrich learning. Importantly, on the subject of project-based learning, integrating disciplines and prioritising hands-on learning are key to Campus 2.0's vision. Interdisciplinary project-based learning merges these ideals by allowing students from diverse fields to collaborate on real-world tasks, applying theory through cycles of experience and reflection, as advocated by Dewey and Kolb. These projects foster collaboration akin to professional creative productions, blending programming, design, music, and marketing expertise. Universities are increasingly creating multidisciplinary studios equipped with versatile resources to support such collaborations. For example, a design build course may see students prototype an interactive art installation, combining aesthetic, technical, and logistical skills. Wenger's concept of learning communities aligns closely with this approach, as students build collective competence by practicing together. Authentic assessments, such as public showcases or industry feedback, further enrich the learning experience. The benefits of interdisciplinary project-based learning are well documented, as we know. Students often report higher engagement and motivation because they can see the tangible results of their work and its relevance to real-world issues. It can also provide problem-solving skills and creativity, as tackling projects from multiple angles fosters innovative thinking. A UK review of creative industries education noted that the top-ranked soft skills in graduates was not technical at all, but the ability to communicate and collaborate across disciplines. Project-based learning directly addresses this gap. An example outcome can be seen in the earlier FutureWorks case. By the final year, students in the FutureWorks model produced professional standard outputs in teams, giving them concrete portfolio pieces and experience of team dynamics akin to those in commercial studios. Furthermore, project-based learning can make education more inclusive. Different students bring different strengths to a project, allowing each to shine and learn from peers. Campus 2.0 encourages such collaborations not just within courses, but across institution and institutions. For instance, a hackathon event might invite music students to team up with computer science and business students to create a new music tech prototype. The campus becomes a meeting ground for discipline, reflecting John Dewey's idea that education should be connected, with the breadth of life and experiences, breaking that artificial barrier between the school, knowledge, practical application, and industry. In summary, interdisciplinary project-based learning transforms a university into a mini ecosystem of the creative sector, preparing students to be versatile innovators and lifelong learners. So, I'm going to show you a couple of case studies. These are spaces that I think could be very much considered innovative, and these are sort of forming part of the backbone for what Campus 2.0 aims to achieve in sort of creating a taxonomy or understanding of how these spaces work and how we can leverage from them. What you see on the screen is Birmingham City BCU's Hive. The Hive at BCU redefines lecture spaces through innovative design and advanced technology to promote active learning and collaborative learning. Its oval-shaped layout with huddle tables replaces traditional seating arrangements. Ultra-wide curved projection walls with sophisticated array of laser projectors, interactive screens, and a 360 audio system. The Hive enables instructors to transition seamlessly between different room modes, such as broadcasting group work or facilitating simultaneous small group activities. This space bridges academic learning, research, and professional practice, with lecturers reporting enhanced engagement and connection with students. By breaking away from conventional lecture hall designs, the Hive represents a blend of architectural and pedagogical innovation, providing a benchmark for future teaching facilities that combine theory and practice to better prepare students for collaborative and creative industries. Here you have Aalto University's Design Factory. This is in Finland and is a globally recognized hub for interdisciplinary hands-on learning, bringing together students, educators, researchers, and industry professionals under one roof to foster creativity and innovation. It was established in 2008, and the ADF has cultivated a student-centered and impact-oriented learning culture through a very fluid space model that combines studios, workshops, labs, and lounge areas. It's a bit like Google. Long-term, team-based projects at ADF tackle real-world challenges, frequently sourced from industry sponsors or student startups, with faculty acting as facilitators to encourage peer-driven, hands-on learning open to all students, regardless of discipline. The facility reinforces a culture of curiosity. You've also got Newcastle University's Culture Lab. Culture Lab at Newcastle University demonstrates, I think, very finely what Campus 2.0 wants to achieve in terms of principles by combining historic architecture with cutting-edge technology to create a hub for digital media and arts. It's located in their grand assembly rooms, and it's a very open plan space which features specialized labs, studios, a sound studio and a sound stage studio for audio research and music. Experimentation and digital cultures are at the heart of what drives the Newcastle University Culture Lab. There's a number of other spaces as well, as there are hundreds over the world. What hasn't been done before is a taxonomic study of what these spaces are, how they work together, and what the central tenets of them are. So a couple of interesting ones to draw your eye to particularly. You have there the staff's esports hub in the top left. You've got one of my favorite spaces, which is the lecture room in the round in the top right. You've also got the QSIS learning space at the University of Hertfordshire, and also the Eastside Jazz Club, which is part of Birmingham Conservatoire. All spaces which challenge the norms in higher education and try and bring industry into the space for students. So, ACM and Campus 2.0. ACM has a long history of innovating in the learning space. From moving into Rodborough Building, which if you'd like to have a tour today, you're absolutely free to do so. ACM has tried to mirror facilities common to industry: studios, pre-production performance spaces, rehearsal rooms, vocal development spaces, Mac labs, all the usual things that you would see, with some extra bits too. Nowadays, this is not unusual, especially for an alternate provider in the creative industries, that you would be surprised how many music faculties throughout the country do not do this. We're also sat here in a commercial theatre, which we lease and run as a commercial and community space that integrates with studies for our students. These are the basics, though, and we need to think bigger. ACM recently launched a new campus in Brixton. The fit-out of Brixton really exemplified the Campus 2.0 principles, integrating cutting-edge creative labs, interdisciplinary spaces, collaboration, and aligning very closely with what industry would want to see. The original design of the campus featured state-of-the-art facilities, including 20 studios, mastering and Atmos suites, expansive maker spaces, communal zones, games lab, esports hubs and galleries, and a live venue to be run by students, enabling synergy across disciplines such as music, game development, and digital arts. All connected with NDI, video, and Dante audio, students could be across the space physically, virtually, and interact continually. I'm going to move on slightly from this. We've also thought a lot about how we augment learning spaces. For example, here, allowing a third-party industry partner to co-design a space with us has yielded some interesting results. Our Roland hybrid drum suite here in Guildford, which was implemented in 2023, allows students to trace the history of the equipment and related practice, engage with a range of technology types, and treat the space as a kind of sound lab, very different to a traditional performance skills development space. This, coupled with a suite of up-to-date technology and unique layout, has led to increases in recruitment, engagement, retention, and student outcomes for roles in industry. Third spaces are particularly important to us too. Like the Electric Theatre here, we also provide our students the opportunity to study and work at commercial studios, Metropolis, Blue Rooms, Grosvenor Road, which fully immerses them in professional settings. We are launching a program based out of Metropolis this September for sound audio engineering. We also work closely with Supermassive Games here in Guildford, allowing students to work together in incubator spaces with the team at Supermassive. What better space would you have to learn this vocation and the professional standards and expectations of the environment? Digital space is also incredibly important to us and merits a separate paper of its own. We're incredibly proud of what we've achieved here at ACM with blended learning spaces. Our broadcast lecture methodology allows us to dissolve geographic boundaries between students in our 3 locations, allowing them to network as a single large national group instead of the within campus bubble. From this, we've seen many incredible projects bloom, featuring students that collaborate with digital tools across the country. What's more, we encourage students to visit other campuses, and while this is particularly easier in the south, with Guildford and London, it's yielded some incredible output. In summary, we are well on our way to embodying the principles of Campus 2.0 and have a number of initiatives planned to do so. So I'm just going to put all of these up because I'm aware of the time. and just talk through very briefly. So these are some of the next steps for this research project. It's a long-term research project, which will sort of start this September and move into the next few years. The initial things that we're looking to do, developing a working project group, only within ACM, but also with other institutions, create a digital resource hub so people can be aware of the other spaces that exist and how they may leverage them, develop staff training modules so staff can better leverage the spaces that they occupy, run some pilot programs with some new designs, importantly develop a taxonomy of learning spaces, including an industry skills matrix map for these spaces. In the long field, there will hopefully be a book. We'll run a specific symposium on learning spaces, hopefully develop a national network, really get hands-on with industry and try and get industry into design spaces. Longitudinal impact studies, and something that I feel really passionate about, but which is lobbying for formative education to consider how learning space impacts and what the principles of the Campus 2.0 project can do. That's me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'm going to throw it straight open for questions. We have two wonderful student ambassadors with microphones running around, so we can put those up on the live stream. So just give us a few seconds to get to you. Yes, Ben.
Thanks very much. Really interesting, particularly for us from ICMP with our new national sites. We're really interested in, in exactly this. I'm really interested in what the students have said about what they're looking for, because obviously we are coming from what we think they need, but I'm really curious, has there been much consultation and feedback on what they think it could look like?
We've run a couple of surveys in a few different areas, so primarily in music to begin with. With games, we're still a little bit, in terms of our legacy, it's still in its infancy. But in terms of music, what we are definitely finding is that students want more open spaces. They want more spaces where they can be free to interact. What they want less of, you think of ACM 15, 20 years ago, all of those, and with ICMP and BIM and the Instritute, etc. Pictures of 50 guitar players in a room sat looking at an individual in the front. It's very different now. It's not that. And I don't think that works in the same way it used to. So it's less of that. It's more about community. Students also want to be able to move in and out of things, but without any friction. So if they miss something, they know that they can go and access asynchronous content. The problem with that, or the paradox there, is obviously students who then want that and then don't engage with that. So engagement is something that we all need to work on to try and get that a little bit better. But yeah, in terms of students, it seems like what they're after is something that's more open and inclusive. Angela.
Thanks. I'm from independent higher education, so I'm coming at this again from a student angle, but currently wearing the hat of thinking about student mental health. I sit on the government task force for student mental health, and you've been talking about inclusion, which is great, but that can mean different things to different people. And within the creative sector, within creative higher education, there's an over-representation of students who declare disability, including mental health. And so when we talk about inclusion, I wonder, again, whether there's been any input so far from students with declared disability. I don't actually know whether this is a question or just something to think about for the future when you're doing, you said you're going to have a working project group. It might be a good idea to think about someone representing that perspective, because when you're thinking about inclusion, make sure it really is inclusive of everybody from the start.
I completely agree, and I think to both your points, it's as exciting as it is to start something like this and to design and to think about space. You can't do it without having all of those pieces as your foundation. I think that's essential. Inclusivity and student well-being, I think, really my perspective on that, it's not in this project yet, it will be, but we should be moving to more of a kind of occupational health style delivery where all spaces have access for students to, in the same way that you would in a really good workplace, to access these services in the ways that you want to, in the ways that benefit you. I think it's really important. I think all of those open spaces, you still need to have spaces where students can do their own thing, not feel ostracized by having to be in a space that has been designed in a particular way. It needs to be fluid, I think. But yeah, definitely needs to start with that as a central tenet.
It's a really exciting project as well. I've got like 400 other questions, but I'll ask you them afterwards.
We can do those in the pub if you like.
I have one small question. You mentioned the Dante setup, and I just thought for maybe non-musicians, if you could just unpack a little bit what that meant in that particular space.
I can, but I won't be. The problem is, I'm going to say something now in front of a couple of my colleagues who are here who are experts.
Okay, yes. That's why they actually set this up. This was
thanks, Rich.
That's all right.
Perfect. So, for those of you who don't know, the Dante network is effectively a way of connecting spaces and specifically audio through spaces without having any latency or any kind of getting rid of interfaces, etc. Everything is live. You're moving things as we did in Brixton. The idea was, to give you an example, you had a number of live spaces, production suites, all connected on one single network, so you can effectively pull audio from any source, push audio to any source at any time. It's a way of basically dissolving the need to be in a physical space together all the time.
And that transcended floors, levels of the building and everything, right? It was...
Absolutely, yeah. In terms of the design, absolutely, and it can go further than that. When we did the Metropolis 5G festival, not Dante, but this is over networking, but the idea there was you've got 3 distinct spaces. I'm going to forget what they are as well. One of them is Metropolis, that's easy. One was the Brighton Dome, and I think the other was the O2. And you had performers in each of these spaces connected via 5G, basically performing in real time. It's that sort of holy grail thing for musicians, that zero latency, displaced, being able to perform together. And hopefully, with technology moving, I mean, Surrey over there, you've got the 6G centre now, so that becomes more of a reality.
Excellent, thanks. Do we have any more? We've got time for...
Yeah, I've just got one. It probably continues with the question earlier about inclusivity, but I know you're thinking more about physical design, but it'd be interesting to see if there could be a colour element in there as well, because there are lots of people who are colourblind, and if you think that it's great for us to make a really great red and green, brightly coloured room that just looks brown to people, it might be interesting to see if colours and shapes can be made to make a futuristic learning environment. I'm just imagining kind of Star Trek, if you're like trying to create this brand new learning environment that in 500 years they've decided, well, actually that is the learning environment, that is actually the correct one. Because education's only really existed for like 100 years in terms of schools. So we're still at the beginnings of trying to work out what does work for people. We're still kind of on an old working model of putting people in a room and teaching them from the front. You know?
It's a very good point, and when I was doing a bit of cursory research, as I say, this is only the beginnings of the project. When we were looking at these kind of spaces, I mean, these are beautiful images. They are really interesting spaces, but equally, you come back to things like inclusion, practicality, and output. You know, is that space actually producing what it needs to? I don't know if there ever will be a correct space. I think, but there could be a matrix of spaces or space design features that would make it easier for educators to quickly design. Basically, what I think should be happening is when you're designing curricula, you design space within your curricula as well. I think that's incredibly important. Otherwise, you know, you might be just sort of pushing against a brick wall if you're not in the right space.
Okay, we've got one more from Shane, and then we'll have to wrap up there.
Yeah, just excellent presentation.
Thank you very much.
Interested in the taxonomy and the principles piece. Because I'm troubled by today because the authors that are underpinning it are actually quite radical and very opposed to the marketized environment that we're operating in.
Yes.
And I think there's a warning I just want to bring to the discussion around where we look at places like tech, big tech and Google, and actually the underpinning logic of education that we're trying to do is directly opposed to the underpinning logic of big tech. And so we have to be crystal clear of where we're activists in this space.
Yes.
So that's just something to bring to the discussion.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's quite interesting as well, thinking about emulating spaces. Guildford, you may or may not know, has got about 50 really large games companies, some of the largest in the world. The games companies are undergoing a massive financial crunch at the minute. So what you've seen, Supermassive, who I talked about, beautiful sprawling space over by the station. They had 2 buildings in Guildford. They've cut a quarter of their staff overnight last year and have reduced. So what we can't be doing is designing spaces in line with an industry space that won't exist. I think that's really important as well.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
Please, thank you. Okay, so we're going to just set up for the next speaker. I think we'll probably have some interlude music to set the scene. Got some. What have we got? Oh. Perfect.
Don't put any headset. I'll do my. No, to be honest, I think I'll probably just yeah.
Okay, seamless transition. Next up we have Ben Jones, who's going to present his research on the Airbag framework. And with no further ado, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to start with a question, and this is mainly to the educators, but I imagine some of the students, if they're here as well, this resonates with. But how many of your students read their feedback, do you think? And if they do, how many of them read all of it? How many times have you sat in a results counselling session helping them understand their feedback or being challenged on it? I personally had a huge issue with assessment at school. I was one of the 11+ generation that got in on the borderline. The pass mark was 121, I got 117. I had to appeal to get into secondary school and things like that. And I have a very stark memory of opening my results in the playground with all of my friends and one by one seeing who was going to go to the same school and who wasn't. And that was the first time, I think, in my whole life that I really felt a massive decline in my worth attached to an assessment. And we know that this is something that is going on all the time in our sector. And as I've gone through my own education journey, I've started to ask myself the question of, well, why is this? Why is there such a disconnect between assessment and the experience that we have of it? And I thought about it thinking, is there something in this, the fact that it happens after the event? Is it because we do all this work and then you log onto a portal and you get this number and you get some text, but you're on your own? The tutor's gone. Sometimes this is over a Christmas period or a holiday period or whatever. And you're just left with that as the experience. Some of these projects have gone on for 3-4 months, 2 semesters, 3 trimesters, whatever it may be. And I started to think, well, is that the problem itself? And my research starts to look at a new assessment model of bringing the student directly into the experience by looking at assessment, particularly around criticality, as a dialogue. And the idea for me is getting away from assessment being something that's given or judgment given to the student, and instead looking at it as something that can be co-created with the student themselves. So the background for this came from an action research project that I did for my PG Cert that I completed last year. And it relates to a module on our undergraduate performance program at ICMP, level 6 module called Professional Identity. And the question I wanted to ask in my action research was, how can we better integrate students into the assessment process in order to create more authentic, more meaningful, more engaging, but actually ultimately rewarding learning experiences. Because the anecdotal feedback I hear from my students for the past, 12, 15 years, some of them don't even read the feedback. They see the number and they're like, well, I don't even want to see the feedback now. The number alone has put me off. And we spend so much time as educators doing this feedback. And we write it down and we do staff training on good feedback practice. We do all these things. We talk about it in learning teaching strategy. And then when it lands with our actual audience, they see a 55 and think, nah, I don't want to read that. That's a problem. And it's something that I wanted to look at in my action research. So it was rooted in the theories around dialogic assessment and reflective practice, but particularly from Careless in the feedback as dialogue, and then Jessup et al. And those guys transforming assessment cultures. Because I know this isn't new, this has been around for a while, but it's not common practice yet. We're not embedding it fully into, particularly in the creative arts. So I wanted to see, well, is there something in here that we can make this more accessible? And the reason why this matters is because we've got really hot topics at the moment in our sector that we need to start stepping up to. The first thing is this idea of authentic assessment and clarifying the difference between authentic assessment and real world, because that don't necessarily mean the same thing. For me, the way I'm defining authentic assessment is the idea that it's authentic to the student itself as well as the industry. Because in terms of inclusivity, diversity, and then moving into really important things like decolonization, we have to look at all of these together. We can't just say, well, that's what the industry does, therefore that's what you must do. We have to consider two sides of the coin, of the academic side, the industry side, but to remember that this is education. They're not experts yet. They're here to learn from us. And then finally, this idea of student agency and co-creation. At ICMP, we are completely committed to a learning partnership model. And I'm sure ACM is too, and I'm sure most of our fellows in our sector are. But what does that mean when we live it day to day? Do we live it in the classroom and put all that work into the classroom and then get to assessment and then completely abandon that and end up just handing grades in a faceless way? So I feel that this was really important to start looking at as a way of pushing our sector forward. But we have an imperative from the FHEQ as well. It's here in, well, not black and white, but green and black. These are the level 6 frameworks that we need to be giving to our students to demonstrate, to get their qualifications. Critically evaluate arguments, assumptions, communicate information, ideas, have learned to review, consolidate, extend, apply their knowledge. It's all in the frameworks of higher education already. So how can we live this in a more meaningful way? So let me give you some background on professional identity. So the module is a 40-credit module at the end of the undergraduate performance course. It's designed to set up the first year of their career. So the whole thing is framed along the lines of, you're leaving us in about 4 or 5 months. What do you want that next 6 months to a year to look like for you? How can we bridge the gap between your leaving education and stepping into whatever industry looks like for you next? And we come across some of the same things, which is that, oh, if I make this decision, is that me for the next 20 years? It's like, no, let's just focus on the next 6 months. What do you want to do when you finish the course, and what do you want your career, your life, and whatever to look like? So professional identity really pulls that apart and looks at that type of identity that we find within our professional practice. And the assessments are 2 components. The first one, which is worth 20%, is a proposal of the project. And then you've got a project portfolio, which is 80%. Within that portfolio, they have to produce 30 minutes of music that is, in their eyes, aligned to performance. So that could be live, that could be recorded, it could be a blend of the two, content creation, whatever it means. Since COVID, we've completely changed the way we view the word performance. We think it's really important to embrace every aspect of that word, particularly in the way that the diversifying student body is showing up in our courses. So the second part of that portfolio, as most level 6 modules have, is some sort of reflective element, a reflective critique, critical dialogue, 2,500 words or equivalent. We know, this is just all commonplace to us. And that's where I wanted to focus my attention, because actually the work itself, there's no issue with that. I've had some of the most incredible projects come through this module, from designing apps for drum tuition to starting non-profit organizations, helping artists get better revenue. Whatever it may be, we're no short of ideas, and I'm sure it's the same in your institutions. But there's something about the closing of that assessment, particularly at level 6, when this is the goodbye for most of us. It didn't feel meaningful to have that experience close and for them to be on their own, on their laptops, on their phones, reading feedback from me or the team to mark the end of that experience. I felt there was a gap there. So that's where I focused on, was the idea in the portfolio of this critical dialogue. Now, I am a big-time fan of a podcast called Coaching for Leaders, hosted by Dave Stachowiak. It's an American podcast that brings on guests to talk about leadership practice. And I was driving to a gig one day, and the guest was this gentleman here, Robert Cujo Teschner. He is essentially the real-life Top Gun. Okay, so he worked for the Advanced Weapons School in the American Air Force. Basically, that's what they based Top Gun on. He is the original Tom Cruise Maverick dude. And when he came on, I thought, oh, hang on a second, here we go. This is going to be incredibly oppressive, like it's all going to be about dominance. And I was thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to give it a chance. But his whole thing was around reflection and the importance of reflection. What I then heard was some of the most incredibly inclusive practice of reflection that I'd heard in any educational circle. So I bought his book, Debrief to Win. And it was all about reflecting on experience, because obviously for us it's really important, but it's not life or death. For him, it is life or death. If they don't reflect on a mission that hasn't gone well, or has gone well, it's going to affect essentially the lives of those pilots, the lives of those people. And he presents this framework called the Raptor framework. Of course, it has to sound, aggressive and dinosaur-y and things, but it works really, really well. So you've got this idea of reconstructing what happened, agreeing on fundamental questions of what happened, presenting driving factors, thoroughly agreeing on the root causes, organizing a plan, and then rapidly improving. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that's got a lovely educational flavor to critical practice that we would put in the creative arts. So I thought, okay, this is really interesting. I wonder if there's something in here. Now, it doesn't automatically sit into education, so I thought this is going to need some tweaking. So I based my action research project on looking at this framework and applying it to creative arts education. So I took Raptor and I thought, okay, in this critical conversation with my students, we're going to remove it away from writing, we're going to sit down in a room and we're going to talk about their work. But it still needs to have rigor. It still needs to have a framework. So at first I thought, let's start embedding Raptor by taking the principles and changing it to make it match what we need. So for reconstruction, a question like, how well do you think you've achieved the goals you set out? Tell me what happened. Set that scene for me. You had this goal. How far away did you get? Agreeing on fundamental questions. What questions did you ask yourself along the way? Which ones were the most impactful? Present driving factors. What were your processes, your attitudes, your approaches throughout this project that's led to its outcome? Thoroughly agree on the root causes. Well, why do you feel the project turned out the way it did? And don't get me wrong, this is not just about looking at the things that they didn't achieve. This is about going, you have ended up with an incredible project here. How did you get the success? Like, let's talk about what you've done really well here. We spend way too much time looking at what hasn't been achieved, and we don't spend nearly enough time going, but you smashed it. How did that happen? Let's get that out, because in 2 months you're on your own. Can you duplicate it? Can we get better at this? And then organizing a plan. So what have you learned about yourself through this project? What's next for you? and then rapidly improve, what resources do you now need to develop this further? And it felt okay. This felt like a good framework to go into. So I tested it within my action research project. But I had some additional goals as well. Obviously, for all of us, we always got the data sword hanging above us. We're always looking to improve outcomes. We're always looking to improve data. So student satisfaction improvement was another big thing on this list. What I really wanted to do, because for me this is really tied to my values as an educator, is to really bring in psychological safety in assessment. I don't think we can have meaningful educational experiences without psychological safety. I think that is the biggest barrier for our students. The idea that we were going to sit down and talk about their grades with them in person, you can't ask someone to step out of that comfort zone without providing psychological safety. So that was a big part. Enhance their criticality of their work and practices, obviously, in line with the FHEQ. To start looking at embedding negotiated assessment methodology practices, but really to construct a meaningful conclusion for their studies. We all know that third year goes by like that, and before you know it, they're like, oh, that was it, is it? Okay, yeah, we'll see you at graduation in 4 months or whatever. I wanted to make and celebrate a point in that journey for them as a meaningful cornerstone. So what did I do? Well, I had 3 points. The first point was pre-assessment, pre-intervention questionnaires, talking to them, asking them about what does assessment mean to you? What's your experiences? What's worked? What hasn't? How much do you care? How much has it impacted you? And going there from there. That's the results of 2 cohorts. 49% felt engaged by assessment, and less than 60% thought assessment was meaningful. That's quite worrying. Then the intervention itself, it's gone. Where's my additional slide gone? Sorry. Something has disappeared. That's a shame. Okay, so I'll just describe what I did because there's a missing slide. So what we did is they came into the room, they sat down, and I asked them to grade the work as it stands today. So I said, the project that you're bringing in today, what grade do you think it is? And that was for me to understand where they feel the work is. Then they presented the work. I made notes. We had a couple of questions just to clarify. Then we got into the recorded conversation and the dialogue. That was their feedback as well. So to save us from writing the feedback afterwards, I gave the audio file, uploaded that. That was our conversation. And at the end of that conversation, with the grading criteria together, we negotiated the grade. I said, this is where I'm landing on. What are your thoughts? Then we gave them a band between sort of 2 mark bands, obviously said it's subject to moderation, and we closed it, uploaded the audio. That was it. And then afterwards, I asked them some different questions, and that slide has gone as well. That's really annoying. But the outcome, and I will link to the slides, was a 97% result of engagement and feeling the assessment was meaningful. And a 100% response saying you need to embed this across the program. This is what assessment should feel like. So from there, I thought, right, I'm going to build a new framework. And this is what Airbag is about. Airbag is essentially a way for educators to get into this practice. The first thing is A, for alignment. This conversation must stay rooted in the module learning outcomes and the assessment criteria. A question you can start to ask is, how does this work demonstrate the criteria you set up or that we agreed upon? The I is for inquiry. The discussion must be led by curiosity, not judgment. It invites open exploration. How do you feel your processes, your attitudes, your approaches throughout the project impacted its outcome? R is for reflection. The student is encouraged to articulate what they've learned about themselves, their practice, and their development. What have you learned about your strengths and areas for development by doing this project? B is for the bargaining part. The student's invited to question or propose an adjustment to the grade based on their interpretation of the work presented and what's come up in the conversation. Does this grade feel accurate to you? Is there anything you feel hasn't been fully acknowledged? Have I missed anything? A is for aggregate. The final grade then is based on both the artifact that they've presented and the conversation itself, which acknowledges the value of both the performance and the reflection, embedding this practice research sort of methodology into them in this stage. In what ways do you feel the work presented reflects the journey you've been on, seeing that journey as being a crucial part of it? G is for guidance, so our role is to ensure that the conversation concludes with supportive, constructive, and developmental input. This one really changed the game for me. What kind of feedback do you need right now? Where do you want me to tell you my thoughts on this? Not just as a student anymore, you're going out there now. What would be useful? And that sort of gives us a 6-point framework. And like an airbag in a car, I don't want it to be too intrusive, but I want it to be there so educators can use it to keep them on track. We can't lose the rigor of the assessment, so Airbag keeps you in that part. Here's a quote that kind of summed up the whole experience for me and why I started this in the first place. This is what a student wrote. It's much more useful, this is after Airbag, and people cannot get away from the feedback, as some of us don't even read it because of the stress, which is exactly what I said at the start. So the question I want to sort of leave you with today, and I'm really up for hearing your experiences with assessment, is around your own assessment practices. I recently did a journal article which goes into much more detail about Airbag, and you can find it there on that QR code. There's my email address and my Instagram. Please feel free to connect with me. I'd love to hear your experiences. But really, this is the question. What if assessment was a conversation and not judgment? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. That reminds me of a few years ago I was teaching a student at level 6, and she was just preparing for her final performance exam. It was 1 week before it was all going to happen. Yeah. And I said, okay, guys, make sure you've read your feedback from last performance just so you can build on that. And she went, I've never had any feedback. And I said, what do you mean you've never? She said, oh, wait, what, since you've been at uni? She went, yeah. And I was like, well, you have. I've spent hours writing quite a lot of it myself. And she'd been basically checking her grades on her phone, which didn't support the platform. So she thought her entire degree was just a list of numbers.
It's crazy, isn't it?
And that was, it was amazing. So yeah, this is really, I think, a really interesting perspective on this stuff, and it certainly would solve that problem. Anyway, to open it up to yes, Gary.
Great, thanks for your presentation, really interesting. It occurred to me that your Airbag framework is very similar to the format of a PhD in terms of a viva, corrections, and so are you proposing that the student then has an opportunity to go away and change the submission?
No, so not for what I've been looking at within the module that I've been doing. This is really kind of like the goodbye point, so there is no kind of going back. Instead, it is really that feed forward. You've done this project. The whole thing is aligned to their next stage of career development. So really that feedback is to help them on the next stage. There's no resubmission or anything like that. And actually the conversations that I had with my students, of which now I've had just under 100 in the last 2 academic cycles, there've been this moment where they go, that's brilliant. I think I'm ready now to go on. And actually they go, God, I know what I did now, and I know what I could have done better, but actually I just feel really excited about moving on to the next stage. So it's not about resubmission. It could be, but we're not at that stage yet in terms of the design.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, Ben?
Cheers, Ben. I suspected you were a bass player from how smooth that presentation was, so thank you very much. Yeah, I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about your wider sort of industry experience and how maybe that fed into how you developed the framework, because I think it's brilliant, fundamentally, really enlightening stuff, but where, in amongst what you do, did any development come through in that, if at all?
Yeah, it's funny, because actually, for me, it didn't come from my practitioner experience as a bass player or MD or anything like that. It had some elements of it, obviously, from leadership, but that's where it came from for me, was my leadership practice and leaning into more coaching practice that I've been doing recently, because my whole leadership ethos is everything is a conversation, everything is a dialogue. Nothing is set in stone. Even disasters, we can find our way through with conversation. And I was finding that actually the pastoral side of my leadership role, talking to students, helping them to see this through helping them talk it out, was having this massive impact. But then I kept hitting the wall with assessment. I was like, hang on a second, there's something in this. Like, what do we do when we come off bad gigs? What do we do when we come off projects? We talk about it. We don't send each other pages and pages of feedback. We go, let's talk about what happened there. Usually in the pub afterwards, going, oh, we should have probably checked that talkback mic, or, should have said that key was going to change, whatever. For us, it's just normal practice to reflect like that in a dialogue. And I thought, so why are we separating this out when we're teaching creative practice? So consciously, it didn't come from my professional practice. I was really thinking about my coaching practice, where I was trying to embed that. But looking at it now, one was the chicken and the egg before the other, definitely. And I think that it does help to have that for them to understand. Thank you.
Ben, thanks so much. It was a really, really enjoyable presentation. Thank you. It's incredibly brave, I think, and a very honest way of approaching assessment feedback. I was wondering, when you did it, when you piloted it, did you have any anomalies? Did you have any curveballs that the students threw? Okay. Could you talk about any of those?
Yeah, I can, absolutely. So I think the bravest part, or the one that carries the most risk, is them grading themselves when they come in the door, right? Because now there is a context on the table. But for me, I think that's crucial, because one thing that I don't know if you've had this experience, but I'm certainly seeing it all the time, is that our students are coming from a school system where they've never been asked their opinion, and they actually don't even know what their opinion is. And when they give it, they go, was that the right answer? I'm like, I don't know, I asked you what you thought. I've got no skin in this game. I want to know what you're saying. So the idea of them even just putting themselves out there and saying, Joe, I think I did a good job. I was like, well, let's just start with that. But I did have a couple. So I was like, so what grade do you think? And they're like, I reckon it's probably early 90s. I was like, okay, cool. And I didn't go, I was like, brilliant. Amazing. Well, let's get into this, because I'm really excited to see this. And of course, when we get there and we get into the grading criteria, and within 5 minutes, it's not going to be in the 90s. It's going to be probably high 60s, maybe. There is that moment where one of them was like, I don't agree with you. I said, that is absolutely fine. I said, show me on the grading criteria where you feel it could get into the 90s. And they said, well, I think it's really good. I said, I think it's really good too. But show me on the grading criteria where it features there. And they said, well, I think it says high quality. I said, yeah, but it also says innovation. It also says these things. I said, can you show me that where those are? And then you see that moment where they go, that's a fair point. And the defense drops, but the key thing is you've got to go with them and not, I celebrate the fact they think it's a 92. How you handle the conversation when it comes out as a 65, that is the skill of this. But it is uncomfortable. It can be, yeah.
Just before, just to add to that, if you don't mind, just before we pass over to two more questions here, where, in terms of like QA and stuff, where is the sort of back safe with that? If you, for example, that student was adamant and then this becomes a complaint against you as an educator and so on and so forth, what's the system that you put in place there to deal with that?
Never got there yet, but it's still obviously only in its second academic cycle. We obviously have moderation, and these are all grades that are yet to be moderated and seen by the EE. But the power of this conversation is that they can't really leave without saying, do you know what, I can see it now. And I know there will be one, of course there will. I'm gonna get next year now, because you've said that, you've jinxed me, and I'll be in academic misconduct things for the next 2 months or so. Exactly. But I think that the key thing is about this honesty in both directions. And actually what I found as well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but the more I'm getting from my students is, you're not being honest enough. You're not telling me what I actually need to know, you're sugarcoating it. And when you turn around and say to someone in a really kind way, that is out of time, that is out of tune, that is not in line with an industry that you are setting yourself into, here's how it could be, they go, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. If Alice and then Freya, if that's okay.
First, I think your opener needs to come with a trigger warning, because I am also someone who sat the 11 plus, and I am still that 10-year-old girl from 1990-something who failed, allegedly.
Yeah.
And that's a horrible judgment to put on children, absolutely awful, and I wish they would ban it. But secondly, going back to psychological safety.
Yeah, of course.
I'd love to just hear a bit, you talked about the importance of it. I'd love to hear a bit how you created that space when you were doing the assessment. They're going into a really new environment. We've not done that before. They've not done assessment like that before. How you created a space where they felt safe to be able to share with you. Absolutely. So that came into the class content. So when we were in sort of the last 6 weeks of the module, I had them for 1 hour every week as a lecture. I started telling them what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. I showed them the Airbag framework. We went through the grading criteria, and I asked them to input what they think it could feel like. I said, this is how I'm planning to do it. This is the expectations I have of you. I want to know your expectations of me. I want you to tell me what would make you feel more comfortable. Most of it was very simple and logical. They just want to be able to raise questions and all those things. Then we did some simulated interviews. I actually got them to be the tutor and one of them to be the other person, which was quite hilarious because I saw some very good impressions of me, which was really interesting. But it was as well as I could, it was set up by simulating it to that point. I also gave them 2 of the questions I was going to ask beforehand, and I told them that at least 4 or 5 they can't prepare for because that's what it's about, reflecting in the moment. But I wanted them to go in with at least a couple of things. I said, you can bring scripts, you can bring notes, whatever you need to do. And that felt, from me and from them, a way of setting up that psychological safety. But as I said, it's in its early years. There's still points for us to keep reflecting on it.
Freya?
Is it on? Yeah. Sort of 2 prongs to my question.
Yeah.
One of them is I'm wondering whether you've noted any differences in the negotiative aspect of the Airbag model between male and female students.
Yeah,
and
great
the other
question.
one is, and this is sort of going back to the idea of curveballs. When I think about my negotiative experiences with students in the past, there's been a particular type of student who has caused difficulty. And I'm no spring chicken, but older male students have represented by curveballs, and there are robust differences culturally and along the lines of gender in the ways in which people negotiate, specifically with women. And I'm wondering if you've given a thought to that or had any experience with that.
Yeah, I have. It's a great question because alongside these conversations about the grades, we have had tears, we have had epiphanies, we have had moments of realization that they haven't had in their whole studies. And well, first of all, I see that as an incredible privilege to be able to share that space with them and to have that. But I absolutely knew the sort of personality types that potentially could dominate this space. And the key thing for me is the power of questions. Because if someone isn't speaking, that doesn't mean they haven't got anything to say. You just might not have found the right door for them to walk through yet. So when it comes to probably the riskiest question, which is when you go, here's the grade that we have agreed, am I missing anything? That's where the confident people go, yeah, well, hold up. I want another 20 points because I think I'm really, really good. And someone who's more introvert might go, yeah, I don't want to challenge that, so I'll take my 65, thank you very much, even though in my head I know it's an 85. So what I did was, when I said, have I missed anything, and I didn't get much from them, and you're probably right, looking back on it, it probably was more likely that that was a female or female-presenting student who was like that. I would say something like, so let's just go through that grading criteria one more time. Let's just check in with each other. And what's really great, though, is actually they graded themselves higher at the start. I actually found it really interesting that a lot of my male students were at least 10 points down from what they got in the end. Now, that was very interesting. Only 2 cycles so far, so it could be a coincidence, but I am curious by that. Whereas a couple of the artists in particular who are bringing their albums, EPs, launch gigs, things like that, they were about 2 or 3 points within the range, and they pretty much got it spot on. But it was interesting that quite a few guys were coming in going, oh, it's not very good. I said, okay, well, what do you think's not very good? Because is that 42 or is that 75? Some people could see both of those. But they were about 10 marks out. So that, for me, is the next stage, actually, is thinking how... Because that's a crucial point. When you're saying to someone, here's your chance to defend yourself, that could go against your entire, your entire personality type. So I'd like to find out more about that. It's a really good question.
Thank you very much, Ben. We're going to hold it there and go to the next presentation. I'm sure Ben will be up for
absolutely,
a chat
yeah,
and
please
more
do.
questions over coffee.
Thank you.
Okay, if we could have some mood music before the next presenter sets up. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Scott. I've been working here at ACM for a good 6 or 7 years now. I'm very proud to have graduated ACM Guildford 15 years ago. I'll give a little bit of context on my background before I run into what ACM Inspire is and what we're up to at the moment, because it's a useful preface for why it came to be. So I grew up in the middle of North Yorkshire, but surrounded by an abundance of opportunity in the noughties. It was a golden era for arts funding. There was lots and lots of, loads of initiatives all over the place, and I was very lucky to travel internationally with some music opportunities before coming down south and starting my studies, my undergraduate studies at ACM Guildford. So really, ACM Guildford kicked off my career. After growing up with already quite a depth of experience in my music education, I was lucky to start touring just before graduating and really sort of hit the ground running. This was back in 2010. So I consider myself very lucky with the upbringing that I've had. And I think this is very much where we sort of start to get into why ACM Inspire came about, through some reflections as I built my experience as an academic as well. So what is ACM Inspire? Why did it come to be? Here we go. ACM Inspire is a platform to facilitate and coordinate staff-driven collaborative work. Its aim is to spark interest and involvement among students by showcasing the creative possibilities achievable through engaging with campus environments and resources. Secondly, students have the opportunity to collaborate with familiar tutors in a professional setting. That's key to ACM Inspire. Creating original material in real time alongside them. They can take a close look at the creative processes of their tutors, ask questions, and engage creatively as part of the projects as they develop alongside them. And finally, the environments and the resources used are familiar to students, offering practical insights to how the same spaces and equipment they have become familiar with and have access to can be used to produce professional work in a variety of contexts. So there we have it. Firstly, I'm going to give you a few examples of projects that have already taken place here. This was the first project, straight off the mark, just over a year ago now, as we began the rollout of ACM Inspire. Myself and two colleagues, Paul Ressel and Shay Stedford, wanted to essentially have a electronic hybrid drumming jam together. We identified some students who were very excited to get involved in that, brought them into the session. They had leadership roles as part of this session. There was the lead studio engineer. We'll hear from Alex a little bit later on in the slides, who more or less ran this operation. But this is just an overview of how it went down and the kind of music that we created. Another example of a student involved in this actually was we had a session guitarist and a drum tech. That was the sort of overview of the student involvement. But here we go with this clip here.
Hello everyone and welcome to ACM Guildford. My name is Ben Scott, I'm the commercial songwriting at the London campus. Today we're
outside of campus to bring it in and bring students along with them. So today, Paul Wessel, Shay Stedford and myself, we're making a new EP using a beautiful array of synthesizers you can see behind me here, as well as me on drums, to create something we don't quite know what it is yet. There are a number of students helping out to engineer the session, contributing creatively as well as the day goes on, and that really is what ACM Inspire is all about. Create new professional work and bring the students along with us.
So there we have our first example. I'm going to move over to another example, switching from the Guildford campus to the Birmingham campus now, in a session run by Josh Wunderlich, who's a fantastic songwriter and specialist in the K and J-pop markets. Josh ran a songwriting workshop where a number of Birmingham students contributed to the writing process, which in turn led to a real-world pitch to Josh's publishers in the industry. Here we go with Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Wunderlich. I'm one of the songwriting lecturers here at ACM Birmingham, and I'm running an Inspire workshop today, which is focused on writing to professional brief. So I started the day with a bunch of briefs that are from my publisher, that are real, that have come from labels and publishers out throughout the world, and we decided to kind of tackle one, which I'm kind of showing as a demonstration of how you write to brief. We ended up choosing a J-pop brief for a boy band group, and so we started the session by listening to a bunch of references, getting an idea for what we wanted to sort of get out of it. And then I have taken the group through my whole process. And even though I'm here in front of this beautiful SSL desk, I'm actually doing all my work just on my laptop like I would at home, and kind of showing students that you can make a hit song that can be an international hit just from your bedroom with the equipment that you have at home. So that's what we've been working on today.
Gosh, and that was a really terrific session. Some brilliant results came from that. So before we just check out the third and final example of a project, a little bit more on the background and where it all came from. So I mentioned how I felt very lucky to grow up in the environment that I did 20 years ago or so when I was coming of age. And what I started to feel as I got more and more integrated into campus life and working for ACM, in recent years, the benchmarking, the points of inspiration that I remember being surrounded by as I was growing up, they were getting fewer and fewer far between. And of course, this is for a myriad of reasons that I won't get into, the COVID pandemic, of course, and other socioeconomic conditions, perhaps. But the thirst for knowledge and creativity and doing and making things, whilst of course there are always pockets of brilliance that we all are aware of working here for ACM, the connection and the thread between those I didn't feel was the same that I felt like when I was growing up, right, here in ACM all those years ago. So the idea of trying to inspire, to trigger those moments of, oh yeah, I've got this idea for a really cool thing, or I saw my tutor X do a brilliant thing the other day and it's inspired me to go over here and try this thing out. That kind of came to the forefront of my mind, which was the inception of this project, showing our amazing students that we as tutors are also very much involved in industry, and they can get a front row seat on what we do, how we do it, and then be part of that process. So a little bit more context there. The final example here is from the fabulous Nikki Sadler, who's a Birmingham tutor. She was recording her debut album, actually, and alongside the production pathway lead in Birmingham, she recruited half a dozen or so students to be the musicians on her album. So we'll hear from Nikki. Oh, I've got to click on it, I think, don't I? All right. Bear with me. Here we go.
Right, over to Nikki for the
Today we're
moment.
recording some of my original songs for a 6-track EP. We're going to have various ensemble lineups from full band to just cello and vocals.
I'm producing and engineering, and we've got a great lineup of staff over these 2 days coming in and playing. We've got some great assistants as well. We've got my engineering assistant is Beyonce. We've got Tobias playing the drums. We've got Stas playing the bass. We've got Steve on guitar.
We've got Matt on cello.
We've got Devani coming in to play keys.
And Chloe coming to do some backing vocals.
Yeah, so it's a really exciting project. We've got some good first sounds down at the moment. We've gone pretty overboard, miking up the drum kit with everything we could think to point at it. Yeah, got a good little live setup.
And we had Torre, who was doing some drum tech for us as well this morning.
Indeed, yeah, so it's been a good collaborative effort.
It has indeed. Yeah. And we're really excited for you to hear it.
So, most importantly of all, of course, central to the ACM Inspire programme are the students. What we were careful of when initiating this programme is that they are the centrepiece of this, right? Of course, it's driven by staff ideas in the first instance, but it's all about empowering those students. Richard? Yeah, gotcha, thank you. So we'll hear a couple of examples of students that were involved before we draw this to a close. So here we are.
Hi, my name is Beyonce Gao. I'm on the production
we lost
pathway,
sound.
and I'm just here helping with the engineering and recording of Nikki's.
Is there anything we can do about that?
Hi, I'm Torre Lamont. I'm a drummer here on the Drummers Pathway, and I'm here helping out Tobias with a little bit of drum tech.
And we've got a couple more examples I'll just quickly skip to of further student involvement here.
Hi, my name is Devani, and I'm on the keys pathway, and I'm playing the keys for this project.
And then finally, we have...
Hello, I'm Chloe, and I'm on the vocals pathway, and I am doing the backing vocals for this project, which I've never done before, so it's a great experience to have.
All right. So there we have it, everyone. This is ACM Inspire. We'll wrap up with a quote from the student that led the Guildford session between Paul and Shay and myself. So the ACM Inspire initiative was very helpful for me as a student engineer with a lot to learn. Being thrown in at the deep end with the safety net and friendly environment that the tutors created pushed me to learn fast, and I did. Tutors trusted me to work independently within my role, whilst mentoring and leading by example. It's the closest thing I had to professional work through my time as a student, and ramped up my enthusiasm to get into real studios and become a professional myself, which that student, I'm happy to say, now is working in industry professionally. Okay, so I'll end on the framework that I'm working on as the Inspire project continues to develop. The Inspire loop. So we start with nurture, which is empowering tutors and staff through incentivizing integration in ACM Inspire. So one of the incentives, if you like, is that staffs will have the opportunity to use all of the resources that we have an abundance of here at ACM for bringing in their own professional practice. That then leads on to the Inspire part of this, recruiting students for project collaboration, if they like the idea that we've got coming up. Of course, then that builds as we gather the outputs from each of the sessions, where we can showcase our institutional excellence. And then finally, we embed it and we influence, demonstrating the impact and promoting further projects and initiation, leading back to our nurture phase. So that's what we found so far. We've got some really exciting projects coming up next week and at the end of term. From these tutors, Brian Henry is leading an ACM Inspire workshop next week. We've got Tom Atherton leading a mixing session in the Guildford campus here. And then shortly at the end of term, I'm going to be leading a session with another project that I'm involved with, which involves multi-instrumental work. So that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and take care. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Ben. Fascinating talk. So yeah, I'd just like to open it up to the floor for some questions. Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you.
How you doing, Ben?
Yes.
Just a couple questions, mate. Does this expand outside of making music? Like, for example, can we apply this to marketing and live events?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Chaz. Yes is the short answer, and it brings me to a point. One of the sort of tangential benefits of ACM Inspire, if you like, is, as we all know, as many of us work here, there are so many brilliant things going on all the time, right? Of all shapes and sizes, not just music creation. And some of those things occasionally can sort of get lost amongst the multitude of resources that are generated from those. So the conversation I'm having with another member of staff at the moment is bringing all that under the same umbrella, where something might not quite fit into a framework that we have, ACM Sounds, for example. We can bring that under the ACM Inspire radar, because loads of things we do here are collaborative with the students, right? This was just the sort of beginning of the framework to start a version of the projects that are now beginning to emerge. So yes, in short, and maybe we can have a chat about that if you've got some ideas for it, for sure. Cool.
And Ben, then Tony?
Love this. I think it's obviously the cornerstone of what we're trying to do, right? At the end of the day, that's what this is about. One thing that I've thought about with this, we've done similar projects in our institution, but is making sure that this sort of like cooler stuff doesn't then make them think, well, the studies isn't valid as well. Like, so leveraging the output of this, is there any sort of opportunity for them to then bring that back into modular grades and demonstrate learning through that, to sort of go, don't worry, you're still doing this in your studies. This isn't just now the cool stuff, because obviously we don't want them to then see this as separate, because it devalues the learning that we're doing on modular sort of stuff. So has there been any conversation about kind of like, and you could also use this in this module, or we can embed this further? For sure, yes. Thanks for that, Ben. And yes, in short, whilst Inspire is still, the framework is still, it's an ongoing process. A fundamental principle of it is, of course, as part of Campus 2.0, the new Creative Industries Futures program here, it all connects together. For me, it was about contextualizing the why of their grading, the formal part of their studies, if you like. It's abundantly connected to the studio sessions, the writing sessions, everything that we're doing. And the conversations that I've been having with students, the understanding is there, that whilst sure they've maybe got a 4,000-word essay they need to get across the line, they do see that it's connected in their CPD that they're gaining as a result of these professional sessions that build their CVs, that build their core expertise, is all feeding back into the assessment setting. And I think fundamentally it's about building that culture, that virtuous cycle, that the more good stuff that happens, the more good stuff we get out of it. And we'll start to see, it's the first sort of official cycle of ACM Inspire, if you like, this term. But we're already seeing early signs of benefits before sort of data gathering and beyond quotes and that sort of thing. I'm optimistic about where we're going to be in 12 months' time, for example. So, yeah. Reflective dialogue could potentially replace that 4,000-word essay at the end and capture it all there and then, potentially. So, thank you, Ben. That's great.
Cheers.
A slightly devil's advocate question, so I'll caveat it by saying I really, really like the look of this. But it arguably reinforces the master-apprentice model that is sort of counter to a student-first pedagogy. So, and what are your thoughts on that, and how do you ensure that the students are foregrounded over and above, the tutors project?
I love that question, and I think that's hugely important to consider. I would offer, I suppose, a sort of gentle rebuttal is that my instinct of student-facing education, students being at the fore of education, is hugely important, of course, but I think there is a case to be made for showing sometimes, look, this is what 20 years of me doing this professionally, earning money from it, which we would like you to do too. This is what it looks like, up close. You're here with me working at a pace that I would work at in a professional environment, in any rehearsal setting, in any writing setting, come along with me, join me in that, rather than allowing for, well, I'm being very careful as I word this, because of course it's a hugely important question, rather than adjusting the pace, let's say, to match the room, we say, no, here is the pace that you're all going to be involved in, best case scenario, everyone in the room very, very soon. You're going to be entering industry. And here's what it looks like, and draw from it what you will, with the obvious caveats of discretion. But I think it's an ever-present thought in my mind as this project goes on, because the last thing that this I want this to become, or that anyone would want this to become, is what you described. So we don't want the staff to be at the center of this, it's very much the students, but at the same time, we'd like to show the students what we're doing when on a Tuesday we're in John Henry's, loading in our gear and there for a 12-hour rehearsal, and what does that look like when you're working to the clock and the person who's paying you to be there is looking at every single minute as it counts. That reference point in industry is crucial to it as well. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
Great, and actually very well timed. So, love the umbrella, particularly for capturing lots of different projects under the ACM Inspire. When I think about bringing together the first presentation as well, Campus 2.0, makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
But to move it forwards, we want to think about power dynamics, and we want to think about, Tony's question. And I would just encourage the ACM Inspire to go further over the next few years. I would love to hear stories, talking heads from Tutors, about students who've inspired them.
Sure.
Because the thing about a community of practice is we need both and I think one of our core tasks in being effective educators is legitimizing student work.
Sure.
And you're a bit slow, you'll get up to speed, but actually you're doing that thing, and when I was your age, I never would have been. And, just stories about how the staff are also being inspired to make new work from the student body.
Certainly. Yeah, fantastic point, and very much, the more feedback at this stage of the project that we get, really the better. So I'm in complete agreement with you on that point. Yeah.
If I could just add something as well, perhaps. I think what I love about this project is that it's not this idea that we're all talking, particularly in music academia, it seems rife with this notion of presenting real-world experiences, and they're not. They're a fabrication or a sort of a synthesis of what a real-world experience might be. What I love about this is that it is, and it's important to probably mention as well that, not to speak on behalf of Ben, but this is currently like almost an extracurricular event. This is not something that students are assessed on. So for me, what I love about it is not just inspirational, it's aspirational. It has that sense of, I'm a student at ACM engaged in my studies, but there's also this opportunity to present, because actually the professional practitioners are investing a trust and risk in this as well. So given that this is actually a real thing, and it isn't a synthesized real thing, I think we just to sort of flag that if that wasn't clear, because I think I like the way that this is an additional thing to education rather than part of the syllabus. But that's not to say the principles can't be embedded, for sure. But I think that's why the students are responding so well to it as well. It's almost like there's something. It's a bit like when I was at university, you wanted to be playing with the third years. And I think we're sort of losing that a little bit with a whole bunch of different reasons, but we're using that sense of, I get to play with the bigger kids that are better than me and that sort of thing. And I think this kind of makes a very visible opportunity to do that. So that's what I enjoy about this anyway.
For sure. Absolutely. Thank you, Richard.
Any more questions, guys? Yes.
Right now, no. But that's all to come. The infrastructure surrounding it is the next step. But yeah. Great.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. We're going to take a short break for I believe 20 minutes. I have to check my notes. Yes, 20-minute break, and we'll see you back in here afterwards. Thanks very much, guys.
Can you quickly say the phone?
Oh.